So Rich and I are gonna be cleaning the barn today. I use the cultivator to cut squares, and then we pry them out with the pitchfork. I put them in the tractor bucket and put them on my pile of manure that I then sell to local gardeners and stuff. So I'm waiting for him to come in and thought I would grab some footage of me with the girls. This one that jumps on me, her name is Lucy. She's really got a lot of energy. I don't know why she does this. Figure this is not going to be all that cute, you know. Dirty. I'm gonna hold you next time you jump up here. I got you. How are you doing here today? you up somewhere. What am I going to do when you grow up? You're the boss of me, don't you? First thing I like to do is get the dry stuff up. I just scrape it with a snow shovel, and then we'll go after. We'll probably just try and get this square peeled off today. Now I'm going to take this load of poo and hay and stuff over to what we call Mount Shipmore. After all the dusty stuff is scraped up, I take my cultivator, which I've retrofit with an edging blade, and I cut little squares in the hard pack. And then we pry those squares out with the pitchfork and load that up on the tractor. And that just gets the floor back down to the hard earth, so it's nice and clean and dry for the sheep. So I'm going to use this Paul Worth skein that I got from my friend Cindy, just because it needs the most data to catch up with the other skeins that I've already completed. So on the index card, I've got the breed, and then I dated when I added that record. This was hand comb topped that Cindy made and then gave me from a fleece she had, and it's 2-ply. So I spun it with the lace kit. I made note of that. And what I did get was the unwashed length of just one round, which was 52 inches with no stretch. But it occurred to me I also would like to know how long the yarns are if I stretch them. And then the other thing I'm tracking is how many peg holes are open inside the round, and that gives me an indication of the yarn's stretchiness, I guess we're going to call it. Because remember, they have all been wound on the same nitty-notty with the same amount of tension, because I know I do it the same every time. So the Paul Worth is now on the nitty-notty, and what I mean by the number of holes is I'm just counting how many open holes there are, because as I said, it's different for every skein. And what I'm making sure is that there's a little bit of play, a little bit of looseness, but not flaccid and also not super stretched. So they've all pretty much consistently had a spot where it was like this. So I'm just going to count the number of holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 holes. And just document that here where it says number of holes. So, that one I still have to do. Let me see if I've got some here that are done. Okay, so for example, and I'll put this on a table, the Paul Worth had 18 holes. The Cormo was a bigger skein. It was a longer skein. It wasn't as stretchy. So that had 20 holes. This is Caitlin. Might be the first skein that I made. This one had 15 holes, but that was after I washed it. So anyways, kind of interesting, different bits of data that I'm collecting. Now I'm going to show you how I am going to measure the yarn, the length of it. So I've already freed this little strand from the constraints, but what I've done is without any stretch, that's where this string starts is this peg. So I'm going to unwind it to where the peg is here. Then what I'm going to do is take one of my twist ties from my collection and grab the strand where it meets that peg. So this is one full round right here. Then what I discovered is that the twist tie shifts up and down. So I'm just going to crimp it here to make sure that it won't move, just because it makes it easier to measure. And I didn't really do very well. Let me try it again. Okay, good enough. So the next step is I fasten the end. So I have a little piece of tape here. And I want to get it as close as possible. So I just tape it down. Then what I'm going to do is kind of stretch it a little and then bring it back to the relaxed. To me, I'm going to say it's at 50 inches unstretched, and this is the Pulworth. Now, I said 52 the last time I did this. So I'm going to make it 51 without stretch, but then watch this. Then it goes to 57 when I stretch it out. So then what I'm going to keep track of, what did I say, 57? Is the percent that you gain by stretching it to get a sense of the elasticity, but I have an actual number to compare with the other ones, which I think was going to be interesting. So that's a new piece of data that I just decided to add. It's fun. What we're looking at here is all of the lace weight yarns that I've spun in order of when they were created. And some of these have been washed, some of them are yet to wash. So I'm just going to go through them really quickly, and I do want you to take note of, these were all wound on the same niddy-noddy, and yet they have different lengths, and that is all about, the amount of crimp and stretchiness with the yarn and stuff. All right, so this first one is the Jamieson and Smith. I just took a small quantity. I did not do a half of an ounce on this just because I didn't want to waste it. So I'm going to extrapolate what half an ounce would be once I get it done. This I took off of a bobbin, so I'm going to that I bought from Jamieson and Smith. So part of the experiment here is going to be I'm going to wash it and then measure it after washing. So that's the first one. The second one is my first time using the lace kit, and I spun Caitlin's wool from the lock, and all of these going forward are half an ounce of wool. And they're all 2-ply. So I think what we're seeing here is a little bit of experience. Now this one has been washed, but I didn't weigh this one when I washed it. This is Caitlin, again, from the locks, using the lace kit, weighed this one. So I'm gonna wash these again, not apply weight to any of them and see, but these are the only two that have been washed by me. Then I took the fawn comb top. So this is mill processed top, and it's also higher composition of britch wool, which isn't as crimpy, but I think it's more about the fact that it was mill processed. This has not been washed yet. So I've got the measurements of this pre-wash, and then I'll take measurements after. Then this one is the Cormo, which was also mill prep. Just kind of interesting that these are kind of coming out the same length. Then it's the Polwarth, which was hand combed. So my friend just gave me little nests. This is really lovely. I really enjoyed spinning that one for, you know, doing different breeds. Normally I just do my soft shell and wool, so that was kind of fun. And then the last one is Cormo that I spun on the standard bobbin with the standard flyer, so I didn't use the lace kit. And it's interesting, it'll be interesting to see what the results are here. One of the things I would observe is that it was more difficult to spin. I was breaking a lot more and the plying was a lot more difficult. And so maybe the lace kit is more about making it easier and more quickly than it is about the final result. But we'll look at that later. I'm actually looking at some of this, it looks underspun, but we'll do a close-up analysis later. So the next step is going to be wash. I'm going to wash them all in the same bin to eliminate that as a variable. And then I'm going to dry them on this rack without any weight and then take the measurements again and we'll see where we end up. Should be interesting. I want to take you through a quick version of me measuring one strand. So here I'm writing on the index cards the fields for the data that I want to collect for this round of measuring. This is after I've washed the skeins. So I'm loading it on the skein winder, making sure that it's the same amount of tautness as every other skein, counting the holes, writing that down, trying to find the beginning of the skein. So I need to unload it to find it. You can see the stretch on this one. This one's Caitlin. So I find it, now I have to loosen that from the ties that are holding the skein to get one full revolution. And I'm using the pegs to measure that. That's my son Andrew in the background. Okay, so I get one revolution and I'm going to mark that with the twist tie, and I'm going to use the pliers to really clamp the twist tie onto the yarn so it doesn't move around. And that'll be where I do the measurement. So now I'm taping the one end to the beginning of the tape measure, and then where the twist tie lands with no stretch, I wrote that down. And then I'm pulling it a little bit, just enough to make it tight, and documenting that. And now I'm just going to reload it onto the skein, sending it back through the ties with my crochet hook. And that's how I did it. So I did that for all the skeins of lace yarn in this experiment. Okay, my very dear friends, here's where we've reached the end of my lace weight experiment. I'm going to take you through some slides, and if this is a little bit too much like work, I apologize, but it's easier for me to portray data this way. So a couple comments before I start and getting into the data. Number one is I've decided I'm not doing the Turkish spindle. I might do it later, but I'm just pretty sick of this actually, so we'll save that for another time. I have all this data in a spreadsheet. It's Google Sheets, and if anybody is interested in looking at the raw data to maybe add some of their own findings, you know, I can email this to you if you'd like. No issues there. And I just wanted to thank you guys for coming down this rabbit hole with me. I do plan on writing a blog post, and then also I'm going to create a video and compile
some of the clips from the prior episodes to create a standalone video just on this experiment. So the first slide I've got is where I am comparing pre and post wash the number of holes inside the skein winder. And one thing that's interesting is that the Jamieson and Smith, which is number 0 in this chart, is that the Jamieson and Smith did shrink after washing, and that was a theory that a bunch of people had in my comments of the last video, that it's likely that the Jamieson and Smith after washing will get some of that crimp back into it. Actually, before I go on, I just want to point out in these slides I've got in the lower right hand corner like a legend with the different attempts. So on the x-axis I have the attempt number 0 through 6, and then in the little table down here on the right hand side I identify what each of those attempts are, and they're in order of when I actually created them. Another thing I want to point out is attempt number 1, which is my first attempt of Caitlin with the lace kit. I already washed that one, so this wash was actually the second wash, which is why I would surmise there was no change in the size of the skein. And the second one is the Caitlin skein that I weighted. I put a weight on it when I dried it, and you can see that it shrank down quite a bit on that the second wash, which is the one I just did. Number 3 is the comb top. That shrank down. Actually, everything else shrank down, except for, interestingly, the Cormo that I did on the standard bobbin. And maybe that's because I didn't get the high level of twist into that. So I don't know. That's a theory. Some of these I'm thinking I need to, maybe go back and look at the way I measured it again. But it seems interesting that it's so similar to me that it doesn't seem like that would be operator error. The next slide is looking at the pre-washed yarns before and after I stretched them. And I just wanted to get a sense of the elasticity. And I have a table here on the upper right-hand corner where I calculated stretched length minus the unstretched length, which is a positive number, and then divided that by the stretched length to say how much more elastic one yarn is over the other. And interesting to me is that the 2 skeins I made out of Caitlin's yarn are up in the 20% level, whereas like the Jamieson and Smith, and you can see that when I put the skein in my hands and just try to bounce it, there's just not that much there. Now this is pre-wash, so it did gain a little bit after I washed it, but not very much. And the Polwarth also, I felt like that was really elastic. It felt very bouncy to me, and I don't really have an explanation for the Cormo on the standard bobbins. Okay, the next slide is pre-washed unstretched and post-washed unstretched. And so this is to get the actual measurement that's going to tell me how many yards per grams. And this is where you see that the Jamieson and Smith really did contract as predicted. And the mill processed top also saw a little bit, although not as much with mine, a little bit more with the Cormo. So then what I did was I calculated the yards per gram based on those unstretched lengths after I washed it. And what I would say here is that if I were to be entering the skein contest to see the longest skein for the same amount of wool, skein number 4 would be the winner, which was the Cormo with the lace kit from a mill process comb top. Also interesting is that number 6 was second. Now that's the one I did on the standard, so I got a good length, but you can see it even in the pictures, that the plying wasn't good and the strands kept on breaking. So it's possible that if they ran this through the counter at the contest, that skein possibly would have broken before you got to the end. So I would put a little disclaimer on that one. And then finally the wraps per inch, which I thought was super interesting. So you saw in the pictures how I wrapped the yarns around the gauge, and the 2 Caitlin yarns had the highest wrap per inch, even though it didn't have the longest length. I don't know. I think that might be just because there's no way I was able to get those to wrap around nicely without some level of stretching it, even though I really tried to do it as, kind of as gentle of a stretch as possible. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So those are my observations. Hopefully you enjoyed this process with me, and thanks for going on this journey down the rabbit hole of lace weight yarn experimenting. And we'll do more of this stuff down the road as I get curious about different aspects of this craft that we've got ourselves caught up in. Thank you so much.